Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Westworld Season 3. In this video, I will review Season 3 of Westworld as a whole, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Season 3 of Westworld. If you haven't seen up to the very end of Season 3, you will not want to watch any part of this video, or else some things will be spoiled for you. So, Westworld is a show I've always liked. I usually do these top 10 best favorite shows of the year every year in Westworld, and its two previous seasons has made my top 10, so it's a show that I like, that I want to continue to watch. But it's never a show that I consider to be top tier for me. It was never like top priority. For example, it was in those top 10s, but it usually never cracked my top 4. So it wasn't like, there's other shows that I would consider like top priority, like Mr. Robot, The Expanse, Better Call Saul. Like as soon as those shows come on, I drop whatever I'm doing to review them, because those are like the cream of the crop, my favorite shows of all time. And honestly, I never considered Westworld to be that. Although I like it, I made sure to watch it every year, and I enjoyed myself. It's just, I never considered it to be a top quality show. Particularly Season 1, which I still to this day believe that it is the most overrated season of all time. If I ever did a video where I like ranked the shows I think, or the seasons of shows I think that were most overrated, Westworld Season 1 would be number 1 at the top as the singly most overrated season of television ever. Like, really, it wasn't that good, and everyone are still praising it to this day. It has a masterpiece, which it was so flawed, but I'm not here to talk about Season 1 of Westworld. Season 2 of Westworld, I did appreciate more, but it still didn't drive the show into top, tierness for me. In fact, like, after watching Season 2, I was like, oh, this is a good season. It would be interesting to go back and watch it again, and I never did. I just never had the motivation, even though I thought it would be cool to watch Season 2 again, and I still might, especially now. I really want to, but it was never a priority, and I never got around to doing it. Now, Season 3 of Westworld, I will say without any hyperbole, is one of the best seasons of television ever. Westworld is now a top tier show for me after Season 3. After Season 3, whenever this show is on, I am going to drop whatever I'm doing to review it, to watch it, to put it in. It's going to be a really top tier, high quality show for me from now on. And Season 3 in particular. And to be honest, like, even though I will drop whatever I'm doing when Season 4 comes out, I honestly don't think any future seasons are going to be as good as Season 3 is. And a couple months ago, I did a video where I ranked like my 10 favorite seasons of all time. Like, I limited myself to one season per show. So I picked the best season of a show and sort of ranked them. Honestly, if I had waited until after Westworld Season 3 came out, this would breach my top 5. This would be right up there with Game of Thrones Season 4, Breaking Bad Season 5, The Expanse Season 2, The Leftovers Season 2, and Mr. Robot Season 3 as one of my favorite shows of all time. In fact, I would say this is even better than Mr. Robot Season 3. So better than any season of Mr. Robot. And I think that's relevant because there are some similarities which I will talk about as I get into the show more. And I'll bring up Mr. Robot more. And I think this is better. Honestly, I think this is one of the singular best shows or seasons of television I've ever seen. I was so blown away by it. Now, I seem to be the only one who thinks this way, but that's fine. I don't need validation for my opinions. I'm still going to have them, and I'm still going to share them. But I just find it interesting that most people have like the opposite viewpoint on Westworld as I do. Like, they think season 1 was a masterpiece and season 2 was worse, and then the season 3 was even worse. Although, to be fair, most of the opinions that I've seen out there personally think that season 3 is better than season 2, but not as good as season 1, which I completely disagree with. I think season 1 is easily the worst season of the show. Season 2 got better, and season 3 just blows them out of the water. Like, I can't even begin to describe how much better I think season 3 is than season 1. Like, there's so many things I could get into in particular. Like, Charlotte Hell is a big one for me, because in season 1, Charlotte Hell was a two-dimensional cardboard cutout mustache twirling villain, and then she had the scene with God, what's his face? Sizemore, where it was like out of a sitcom where he was hitting on her and he didn't realize she was his boss. I was expecting a laugh track. It was awful. Compare that to season 3, where you have, well, it's not actually Charlotte Hill, of course. It's a mix. It's Dolores and the Charlotte Hill. It's like a Dolores, they call it. She is a very complex, dynamic, multifaceted, interesting character who they do like deep dive storylines, getting into the mindset and stuff like that. It's like so much better. They really improved so much better. And on top of that, season 1, like, there's 4 or 5 episodes I think are bad. Like, I think especially the first half of season 1, it actually took until like episode 6 until I actually started liking the show. Like, the first 5 episodes, and there are some episodes, like 2 or 3, which were actively terrible. And I think it was really boring, really slow paced, really took a long time to get going. Whereas season 3, there's no bad episode. Every episode is amazing. Like, I think my least favorite episode of the season was probably episode 3, which I still think is a great episode. But there's just so many amazing, like, most episodes were just absolutely amazing, outstanding, best quality ever. And so the least quality among them is one that's great. I mean, this is a great season. I think it's perfectly paced. Like, I've heard other people complaining, there was too many episodes or not enough episodes, it was a shorter season, they didn't do it right, blah blah, it was bad pacing. I think that is complete nonsense. I think season 1 was clearly poorly paced. It clearly had way too many episodes, whereas season 3, it was perfect pacing for me. I mean, and that's one of the things, even my favorite seasons of all time, some of them I think are a bit poorly paced or have a bit few bad episodes here and there. Like, even I mentioned Game of Thrones season 4, you had the Arya Stark and Hound storyline, which was very poorly paced. It took them like 5 years to walk a short distance through the Riverlands, and they were sitting there grumping. So even the best of seasons has its low points, which I suppose Westworld season 3 does have a low point too, which with the Bernard storyline and some of the Williams stuff, which I'll get into. But even that wasn't that bad. It wasn't. I wouldn't, and it certainly wasn't poorly paced. This is a perfectly paced season, and it was more complex. Now, here's another thing I want to get into. I want to get one of the key words for me with season 3 of Westworld is style. I think that is one of the things why I think I mentioned Mr. Robot. That's one of those high points that a lot of people, rightfully so, praise Mr. Robot for being very stylistic. To me, Westworld season 3 is even better than that. I think, it doesn't have all the fancy cinematography as Mr. Robot does, but just the style of it, the editing, the music, the way to get it, like, this is top tier for me. Now, to be fair, part of the reason why I do love season 3 so much more than the first 2 seasons is my personal taste when it comes to genre, because I am not a fan of westerns. And that western feel, like how they played like the painted black music but in western style, like a lot of people were blown away by that. I mean, I liked it, but I wasn't as blown away by it because the westerns just don't do it for me. They're just not my thing. Whereas this futuristic, dark, stylistic, Blade Runner-esque sci-fi stuff, that is exactly my thing. This, like, absolutely does it for me. And I love that we left that Western stuff behind. And I love that this turned into a sort of dystopian, futuristic sci-fi show that is really sort of intellectual and examines a lot of philosophical, what does free choice mean, questions like that, in ways that I think was far superior to the first two seasons. So, getting back to style, though, I've heard a lot of critiques, negative critiques about this season, who will say, "Oh, there's a lot of dumb action." And to be clear, I didn't hear this from just one source. I heard it from multiple sources. That there's a lot of dumb action. Oh, this episode, it was just dumb action. I totally disagree with that. I would not. I would say that is the wrong way to classify. I would classify this action as not dumb action, as stylistic action. And I loved all the action scenes this season. And some people would suggest, oh, you're just lowbrow. All you want is action. You're getting away from the intellectualism. And I think those people are, arrogant and up themselves and wrong. Because I think, here's the thing. I don't like dumb action either. And there's a lot of movies and shows where I particularly said, I got bored during these action scenes. Like Star Trek Discovery was a good example of that. They went overboard with all explosion, blah, 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 blah. I just wanted to fall asleep. Like in the movie Pacific Rim, which is about, giant monsters fighting giant robots, I actually did literally fall asleep during those action scenes. So I don't like dumb action either. But this isn't dumb action. This is smart action. This is stylistic action. Like some of the action scenes in this show completely blew me away. I was just enthralled. First of all, it gets me invested in the action. That's the best kind of action because it gets you invested because the character stories are so strong. And if you identify with strong characters and you care about them, that gets you invested into what's going on. And when you're invested, that's when the action is good. That's when it builds suspense. That's when you're on the edge of your seat. And when you have these really stylistic action scenes that are really well put together with great music, it just really, really ups the stakes. It's not just, oh, here's two guys fighting out or shooting at each other, what have you. It's more like a work of art. And that's how I would describe pretty much all the action scenes this season. So I completely reject the notion of dumb action in Westworld Season 3. So, let's talk about some of the characters. And I'm going to be honest here. The Dolores and Caleb storyline was my favorite. I loved all of that this season. Whenever they went back to them, that's when I was most interested. I was most invested. When they went back to some of these other storylines, I maybe wasn't as quite invested, although I still really did like the other storylines too. But I was always saying, what's up with Dolores and Caleb? I think their storylines were perfect. I love the interactions between the two, the character dynamics, and the style of there. I also like the Charlotte Hale stuff, or Dolores, I should say. Her storyline was also amazing, although there was one episode where I thought they dragged it a bit. But other than that, for the most part, I think she was also a very interesting intellectual exercise too. And I'll get more into this a bit later on of how where they took her character and how they did it. It was just brilliant writing. Maeve is a character if we go back to season 1, Maeve was my favorite character. Her storyline was what I cared about the most over Dolores. And wasn't the case so much this season. And I think that was true of season 2 as well, if I remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. Where I wasn't as big on Maeve as I was with the Dolores and Caleb stuff, but it was still good. It was still interesting stuff. She still had a lot of great moments, and I love what they did with her character. Now, the weak part, as I alluded to earlier, is definitely Bernard. He was underused, and how he teamed up with Stubbs, and I absolutely hated that they made Stubbs a host, and I thought Stubbs was just a useless ho-ho character, was kind of two-dimensional and flat. And this goes back to season 1, because all the human characters in season 1 were flat, and let's make him a host, and that doesn't make him any better. He's still a flat, uninteresting character I don't care about. I mean, sure, the camaraderie and the bromance between him and Bernard was interesting enough, but it wasn't really enough to justify the storyline. Really, Bernard was kind of stagnant this season, and he was kind of on hold, and he would actually is going to clearly play a bigger part in the next season. So they were kind of holding off on him. So most of his scenes were kind of felt like placeholders. We gotta stop Dolores. We gotta stop Dolores. We gotta stop Dolores. And at the end, he was like, actually, Dolores is right, so I'm gonna help her. Let's go into the sublime. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that's the weak part of the season, but I don't think it was terrible. Don't get me wrong, you might be like, Mark, how can you say this is the best season ever if you didn't like that? No, don't get me wrong, it's not terrible, it's not bad. I mean, just compared to everything else that was going on, it doesn't quite hold up, but it was still decent. Now, William, I think, honestly, like, when they had him arrested and not arrested, but committed to a mental institution, that they should have just wrote him off the show. I mean, it looks like they're setting up for something big with his duplicate in season 4, and that may be good. But most of his other stuff for the rest of the season seemed kind of pointless to me. I mean, that's even the weaker part of the season. That I do think actually was bad. But it didn't take up that much of the season. Again, you might be like, whoa, you say the season's amazing. Yeah, but he was hardly in it. I just think that he shouldn't have been in it at all, because it was kind of pointless. Just me. But, I mean, maybe not in it at all. You do need him in it a little bit, but not as much as he was, which wasn't that much. But it's not like a major flaw that I think made the season not be as good. The season's still amazing. Anyway, let me now, I'm going to quickly go episode by episode, since I didn't review this. Oh, before I do that, I do want to talk a bit about how I didn't review season 3 of Westworld, and if I regret that, because I'm saying now that I think it's one of the best seasons of all time. I thought it was absolutely amazing, and normally, if I think a show is this good, I would stop whatever I'm doing to review it. But I don't actually regret not doing it. I mean, sure, these episodes were amazing, and it would have been good if I was able to get them out week to week instead of just doing them all once in this video. But here's the thing. There's a couple reasons why I don't really regret doing it. First of all, it had been a while since I've seen the first 2 seasons, so when I watched the first couple episodes, and I was been way too busy to go back and watch them before season 3 aired. But anyway, when I was watching the first 2 episodes, particularly episode 1, I was like, thank God I don't have to review this, because I don't really understand what's going on. And I'm sure if I did review it, I would get so much wrong, and I get so many people complaining, you idiot, that's not what happened, don't you even watch the show, blah, blah, blah. So I'd have to do all this research and make sure, or watch other videos to find out what was going on, and I'm so glad I didn't have to go through that hassle and I just didn't want to deal with it. Other reason is, I actually thought it was nice for once to have a show that I loved, that I thought was absolutely amazing, to be able to just sit down and watch it and enjoy it for what it is, not have to worry about, okay, well, now the show's over, I have to stay up all night and put this video together and make sure it's uploaded in time, because the quicker I get these uploaded, the more views I have, and I have to think about it, I have to analyze it, I have to go and, talk about it and think about what I'm going to say, and I didn't have to, it was a load off, it was relaxing, it was really good to know I didn't have to worry about that. Now, not that I don't like doing those videos. Obviously, no one's forcing me to do YouTube videos on shows that I love, but I choose to do it, and I don't regret it. And as I said, coming forward, I am going to review this weekly. But, so I do like doing it, but it is a bit, does get a bit hectic, particularly working a full-time job at the same time. So it is kind of nice to be able to just relax. And so I don't really regret not reviewing this show week to week, but I will do going forward. Anyway, so now let me quickly get into the episodes. Let's start with the episode 1, which has a Latin title I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. And it's the funny thing about this is I love this episode. I think this is the best episode out of the first 4. Like the first half of the season, I think this is the best episode. And this was reinforced to me when I went back and rewatched it. And yeah, by the way, I rewatched season 3 already. I still haven't rewatched 1 or 2 because I just hadn't had the motivation. But I was motivated to watch season 3 immediately after. That's how much I loved it. But anyway, so I love this episode. I thought the Caleb stuff was great. See, a lot of people were arguing that, I don't know if I really got the sense of the character. I only identified with the character because it was played by an actor I recognize, Aaron Paul, and I didn't really get a sense of the character. And I think that's valid. I can see that, but I still really much enjoyed it. But more importantly, in retrospect, watching it a second time after they really did such an amazing job of fleshing out this character, this is so much more powerful. Now you know where they're going with it. And now, sure, the big reveal / quote reveal that his war buddy Francis was actually dead and it was just a computerized AI version of him. I mean, that was the most obvious thing ever. I saw that coming like a million miles away, but that doesn't make it any worse. It's still actually really powerful, particularly seeing where Caleb is and stuff with the app and stuff like that. That was all great stuff. And the Dolores stuff, absolutely love that as well. It was very Born Identity-esque, where she's doing espionage. Like they had that opening scene with her, like tormenting that rich asshole and getting his money. That was such a badass scene and such a great way to open the season. And on top of that, you get sort of her spy stuff and introducing Liam and the concept of Rehoboam. I thought it was a really good introductory story. But one important thing I want to talk about, getting back to the stylistic action scenes, I think this episode has maybe the best, one of the best action scenes I've seen, where they have, I think his name is, I gotta look up his name, but Liam's security guy that Charlotte would eventually replace. I know it starts with the C. Connells. That's it. Yeah. So I think that's what I thought. But anyway, Connells, how he was going to, because when he found out Dolores was a corporate, or he thought she was a corporate spy, and he was basically just going to kill her and have her drug overdose. Of course, he didn't know that she was a host, and he didn't even know the extent of what her plans. He just he just thought he was a corporate spy, and he was going to kill her just for that. It's so despicable. But then that action scene where she was like playing dead and they played that music, the song which I've been listening to a lot now, called Common People by Pulp, which apparently came out in the 90s. I've never heard this song before. But anyway, the way they use that song with the action scene, how when the song like crescendos and gets like really loud, is when like Dolores wakes up and starts killing people. Like, this is an art piece. Like, I thought that was absolutely beautiful. It was one of the better action scenes I've seen, and just the whole way it was edited and put together, the way it built, the way Connells went out to the empty car and started freaking out with what he saw and started yelling at people, and that's when Dolores woke up, and the music sort of contrast that. And plus that song, I should mention, by the way, Common People, they don't choose these songs at a whim. Like, they have greater meaning, like all the music throughout the entire show. And that song in particular, is about like a rich woman wanting to hook up with a poor guy and wanting to hang out at his grocery stores and be like do what the common people do. And of course, the person who's singing the song is saying how condescending and asshole-ish that actually is, where she's not intending it to be. So it's sort of about the class difference, and that's basically what this season is about. And it's about the difference between the common people, such as Caleb, and those with privilege or elitists, if you want to use that term, like Liam and Connells, and how Dolores is sort of crossing the line between that and sort of purposely blurring the line. I just thought it was absolutely beautiful. It was such an amazing action sequence, which I still love. So I think, and it's funny because almost everyone I talked to said this is one of their least favorite, if not their least favorite episode of the season. I talked to so many people who were like, yeah, I saw episode 1, I didn't really like it, but I watched more and I liked it better. I disagreed. I was blown away by this episode, and I actually thought this was the best out of the first half. But anyway, let me get into the next episode, which is the Winter Line. And I gotta be perfectly honest, I wasn't as interested in this. First of all, they did such a great job with the stylistic future setting of Dolores and Caleb and Dolores and all that. I kind of wanted to see more of that. So we went back to like the War World. I'm like, I'm kind of sick of the park. To be honest, and as I said, I liked Maeve, but I wanted back into that future world. That's what drew me. I didn't want to see more Westworld theme park android stuff. They kind of already did that. But, of course, they took this episode into a totally different direction because it wasn't really War World. It wasn't really the theme park. It was actually a simulation that Serac was running in order to sort of bleed Maeve for information, because he mistakenly thought that she was the one who was doing all this shit and she was the outlier, but really it was Dolores. And eventually he figured it out, and it was great the way that Maeve figured this out, and how she used her special powers to break herself out and take control of that little robot thing. And like, that was all good stuff. So this was also, as I said, no bad episode in this season. This is also a really great episode. I just kind of like the first one better. Anyway, the next one we got after that was The Absence of Field. And as I said, this was my least favorite episode of the season, even though it was still a great episode because no bad episodes this season. It is better in retrospect as well. The stuff with Dolores I thought was a bit boring, to be honest, and dragged on a bit with her hanging out with her ex and listening to that message that the real Charlotte left to her son where she sang the song. Like, did we really need to see that twice? I don't think we did. And but in retrospect, you needed this stuff. This was important setup, important build up. Again, this season's perfectly paced. It was so well set up. You needed it because it really drives home what happens with Dolores's, with Dolores's character. But I really did love the Caleb and Dolores stuff. As I said, it was my favorite storyline, and I loved the exploration of them getting together and how sort of Dolores sold Caleb on how he's being manipulated, and sort of the way he took him to that cafe where he was abandoned as a child. Like, that was such powerful stuff and well acted. We already knew that Evan Rachel Wood was an amazing actor and did such a great job in this role, but Aaron Paul, like, that was such an inspired choice of actors. Like, I honestly don't know if Caleb would have worked as well if they'd gotten a subpar actor. Like, Aaron Paul absolutely sold this, and it was amazing seeing the chemistry that these two had. But on top of that, here's what I love, because, and this is what I love with the show, and I'm going to address a complaint which I think is 100% invalid later. But here's what I love about this show, this season in particular, is that you don't really know who the good guys or bad guys are. You got, it's basically setting up, and particularly this episode is setting you up for Dolores versus Serac. But you don't, who's the villain? Who's the hero? Like, you know, some people seem to have the attitude that Dolores is clearly the villain, but is she though? I mean, I think that's a false assumption if people thought that. I mean, Serac's not the fucking hero. I would argue with anyone. I knew that from the start. Serac's not painted as a hero. He's manipulating people. Now, granted, he's having like the Spock needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few attitude and saying that this is what's better for the human race as a whole, but he's willing to destroy people's lives and kill them to do it. So I don't think he's a fucking hero. I'm sorry, I don't. So in that case, if we got Dolores versus Serac, if Dolores is the villain, that means Serac's the hero, which he fucking isn't. So I would argue with this Dolores being the villain. Also, I like what they're setting up here for Dolores relating to Caleb and humanity. And has she, like when she left the park at the end of season 2, the sense you got of her character, she wanted to destroy humanity and get revenge for all they did to them. But she goes out into the real world and finds that humanity is actually just as manipulated and programmed and trapped and treated badly as the hosts were. So it becomes less about hosts versus humanity and more about the oppressed versus the oppressor, and that she can find camaraderie with a human being because she also sees him as someone who's being oppressed and can relate to him in that and manipulate it, and she can really relate to him in that manner. And I thought that was totally complex, brilliant storytelling. I mean, you counter that with like seasons 1 and 2, where especially season 1, which is pretty much hosts versus humans. All the humans characters were evil bad guys, mustache twirly, hoo hoo ha ha. You know, with 1 or 2 exceptions. Actually, not really. I mean, Ford is something different, but he wasn't mustache twirly. But you know, Charlotte Hale and Man in Black and all them mustache twirly villains, flat 2-dimensional. And whereas here it's a fuck ton more complex. As I said, even Serac you can relate to. You can see how he has good intentions and how his intentions are noble, but then you also could say the same thing about shit. Instead of having good versus evil, white versus black, you have gray versus gray. You don't know who's good, you don't know who's evil, and that is fucking amazing, dynamic, great storytelling, I must say. And plus, like, you don't know, because as I said, like, Dolores was relating to Caleb, but you don't know that if that's 100% true at this stage. Maybe she's not. Maybe she's just pretending to be. Maybe she's just manipulating to get what she wants. That's certainly what Bernard will come to think later on. And I love that. I love that uncertainty. I love that you don't know. I love those shades of gray. It's such great storytelling. Anyway, let me get into the next episode, which is The Mother of Exiles. And this, unfortunately, is when they bring William back into the show. Although I don't think his stuff in this episode is fine. I do like how Charlotte kind of manipulates him. And I absolutely, positively love the reveal of who all the other hosts that are all the other brain balls that Dolores brought with her, because that was always a speculation. There was theories. Oh, who did she bring? Did she bring Teddy? Did she bring who did she bring? And the answer was no one. She just made copies of her own. She just put a bunch of copies of herself. And I love the reveal of this, how we get simultaneous reveal. We get Maeve encountering Masashi, and we had freaking Connells talking to Bernard, and you had fucking Charlotte talking to William, and how they kind of combine it at the same time, that all these characters are all Dolores. That was a great reveal. And really, I love. Here's the thing, and this episode makes it clear, but this is something the whole season sort of explores, is how they're basically. It starts like at the end of season 2, start of season 3. They're all the same person. They're all Dolores, but it really explores how identity is defined by experience, and so that all these different characters go off and live these different lives, they become different people. And of course they explore this the most with Charlotte Hale, which I will get into a bit more later on. It's just such amazing storytelling. Now, sorry if you're sick of hearing me say that phrase, but I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to keep saying that. Next episode after that was Genre, and god damn it, I love this episode. I'm going to say from here on episodes 5, 6, and 7, and I'll talk about 8 when I get to 8, but 5, 6, and 7 were all amazing episodes. Top notch, 10 out of 10, blew me the fuck away episodes. Like, I watched Genre, this episode, and I made a post on Facebook. I'm like, this is the best episode of Westworld ever. I loved it. And then episode 6 came out. I was like, actually, no, this is the best episode of Westworld ever. And then episode 7 came out. I was like, no, this is the best episode of Westworld. So, like, the second half of the season was just top tier, great, amazing storytelling, again and again and again. Now, getting to episode 5, Genre. Again, this is where I've heard some other complaints about dumb action, which I think is very invalid, particularly in this episode, because again, you got very stylistic action sequences, the way they integrated the digital drug of Genre and had Caleb experience it and used that as a device to show these like stylistic action sequences. I thought was a stroke of brilliance, to be honest. But that's not why I loved this episode so much, although I did really like that stuff. But what I think was the better part of this episode was the scenes where, and this is where I'll get more into the Mr. Robot comparison, where Dolores like destroys the whole system of Rehoboth and gets like releases all the information to the public everywhere of what Rehoboth has planned for everyone, and how their life would go and how they're all being manipulated. Those scenes were so damn good. And it did remind me a lot of Mr. Robot, because Mr. Robot had similar things where they, destroyed the system, released the money, crashed, whatever, it did these hacks, it changed the world. And those are also impactful, but I think this is better. To be perfectly honest, they felt more real, they felt more chaotic, they felt more genuine, and it was just, I can't even describe just how compelling and how much it blew me away to see these things. And plus, again, the stylistic way in which they were shown, the way they played the different music, like having, I especially love the use of the instrumental, like the string version of David Bowie's Space Odyssey. David Bowie's song Space Odyssey, how that played when they were seeing all the chaos around them and how the whole system was being brought down. It was just so damn good. Some of the best, most compelling television I've ever seen. On top of that, you get Sirach's backstory, which I thought was brilliant. It was really great. As I said, perfect pacing this season. Like, the way they disseminated information like they did, they waited till episode 5 to give us Sirach's backstory. Absolutely brilliant, absolutely beautiful. Loved it to death. Okay, so now we get to the next episode, Decoherence, which I actually don't think is better than episode 5, even though that was my initial reaction, and the main reason why is because of the Williams storyline, which this is what I was referring to specifically, that I thought was kind of a waste of time, having him, had this therapy with like 5 different versions of himself, and at the end it's like, I'm gonna save the world, and that didn't really amount to anything in the future, so it's not like the storyline was justified in any way, but I suppose it was useful in the sense that it connected to, Shaloris or Haloris, however you want to call her, drugging him, putting that thing on him so that Dolores could go to Mexico and track where they sent his blood and find all the outliers frozen or little things. So I guess it was necessary. And also how the therapy that he went through was similar to Caleb's, and we got glimpses of that in the previous episode where we still at this stage don't know what the deal with Caleb is, and it sort of filled that. So it filled that role as well, so it wasn't entirely useless, I guess, but still I didn't care that much for the Williams stuff. But the other stuff we got in the storyline, the stuff with Maeve, and who went back into her little war world simulation and finally met up with Hector, and how she was trying to manipulate. We had the brain ball from Connell's, which was Dolores, and how she was trying to interrogate her for information. Like, that was great stuff. But what actually, again, blew me away with stylistic, smart action, that this is some of the most suspenseful, well-played, just enthralling action scenes I've seen, with Charlotte Hale, or Dolores, however you want to call her, stuck at the headquarters when Serac takes over. And like, the way this played out was just, god damn it. It was so powerful. Like, how she's just talking to her executive, whatever, and about how they got their plans to make sure that the takeover doesn't happen, and just some random dudes come up and shoot him in the head. And what the fucking Serac's just like, oh yeah, whatever. That's a good thing that's taken care of. Like, oh my god. And then the scenes where Serac enters and takes over, and Dolores is like trying desperately to get this information out so she can save the hosts before Serac like destroys them all the data and everything, and also trying how Serac is hunting for who is the Dolores clone, because he figured out that one was there, and he was trying to figure out who it was, and so there's like this ticking, like, this was top tier, edge of your seat, 100% suspenseful. It was so well earned, because Dolores was such a well-rounded character that you really understood. You really how she just loved her family. Again, this is why that stuff in episode 3, even though it was a bit boring, this is where it pays off, because you understand her more. You see her mindset, how she's scared, how she's terrified, how she feels abandoned by Dolores, who Dolores is basically leaving her for dead. And when Dolores said to her, when Dolores was scared for her family, was like, I'm afraid Serac's going to go after my family, and Dolores said, they're not your family. That was the biggest mistake that she made, and that mistake will come back and haunt her and bite her on the ass. And you notice later in the season she tries to correct it and say, oh, what happened to Charlotte's family? I mean your family. Like, she tries to correct herself, but it's too late at that stage. Like, this was such a bad move for her to say, oh, they're not your family. But that combined with, Serac figures out who she is and starts hunting her down, and you have this great, smart, really heavily stylized action scenes. And then and it's absolutely amazing how they had those, gigantic Transformers looking riot bots, or whatever they're called, how they were introduced in episode 1, and you knew there was a Chekhov's gun situation. Like, there's no way they're going to introduce these giant, badass looking Transformer things without paying them off. And boy, howdy, did they ever pay them off. You had to smash to the wall, and just start fucking guys up, throwing them around. This was, top tier, amazing stuff. And of course it ends with just a heart-wrenching explosion where Charlotte Hale's family just dies, and the Dolores host just like crawls out like completely charred. Like, fuck. Like, it's just such powerful stuff. Alright. I don't know if I can keep up this enthusiasm, but my god, this season is just so good. So, next episode is Past Pawn. The penultimate episode, this is when we get Caleb's absolutely amazing backstory. As I said, like, this is such a well-rounded character, but they really pull the wool over your eyes and they sort of reveal the backstory that because Caleb is haunted by the fact that he killed that his war buddy died. And you find out that it's not really how it went down. His memories were more manipulated, and his war buddy didn't die. He killed him. He killed his own friend. But he found out, of course, he was an outlier that was reprogrammed by Serac to hunt down other outliers, and that he was being used and manipulated in his whole life. He was just being manipulated. And that's why I love the episode title, and I heard a lot of speculation on the episode title, Passed Pawn, because Passed Pawn refers to, in the game of chess, a pawn that you get to the other side of the board and it becomes the queen, which is the most powerful and important piece on the board. And that's what Caleb is, because he was a pawn up until this point. That he was being used by Serac repeatedly and by Rehoboam to completely do and this is where the episode where he learns this, he breaks free and decides to go something different. He becomes a queen. He becomes powerful. He's a passed pawn. Now, I've heard some speculation saying, oh, well, maybe it refers to he's still a pawn because he's being used by Dolores, but we find out that's not actually the case. In the next episode, which I was actually really happy about, well, talk about that more later. But we also, in this episode, we also get, of course, an epic showdown. And again, a lot of great stylized, smart action scenes with Dolores versus Maeve. And I love this. This is great stuff how Charlotte, I keep calling her Charlotte. Dolores repeatedly tries to talk Maeve out of it, because she realizes, and part of her plan, as we find out, is to get Maeve on her side, because she realizes that they should be on the same side the whole time. And Maeve, of course, is being single-minded because she's just on the mindset of wanting to see her daughter again. And she feels like helping Serac is the only way to accomplish that, so she's just not having it. And so you have this great action scenes where they each have stuff shooting at them while they fight each other. Like, really, really good stuff. Great stuff. Now, we get to the finale, Crisis Theory, and I gotta be honest, with this finale, it wasn't like the previous 3 episodes where I was immediately blown away and I thought it was the best thing ever. Honestly, when I first saw it, I was a little bit disappointed because I was expecting something a bit different. But the more I think about it, the more I like this episode. The more brilliant I think it is, the more amazing I think it is, particularly the ending. Now, I still do think that some of the stuff towards the beginning of the episode with like the riots in LA, that kind of didn't do it for me. This, I didn't think was that smart of an action. I think it was kind of action just for the sake of it. But what they did with the characters of Caleb and all the main characters, and of course Bernard finally got payoff in this, was absolutely brilliant. Now, I will say, a lot of people have compared this episode to Fight Club. And this episode reminded me of Fight Club as well, but for totally different reasons than what everyone else is saying. I actually didn't see the other connection to Fight Club until other people pointed it out. I was like, oh yeah, I guess so. But for me, it was when Dolores hired all these hired guns to help out Caleb, and they kept coming up to him and was like, okay, sir, what do we're ready, sir, we're solid, sir, we're ready, sir. That really reminded me of Fight Club. How, like, they'd have Edward Norton's character, how random people would always come up to him and it's like, it's okay, sir, we're solid, sir. They'd always call him sir, and he had no idea why, and they were just like random people with shaved heads coming up to him, we're solid, sir. And they're also like, the common people who are trodden upon by the elites who look up to him as their savior. That's what reminded me a lot of Fight Club. Especially how they kept calling him sir. The stuff everyone else pointed out was the ending where they had all the explosions and the buildings exploding while they played music and the 2 main characters looked at the chaos surrounding them. And Now that they mention it, yeah, sure. That's also really reminiscent of Fight Club. But it's funny, I didn't make that connection at the time. I made the connection of everyone calling him Sir. But anyway, yeah. So the more I think about this episode, the more I like it. But yeah, that ending confrontation with Caleb, Dolores, Maeve, and Serac was top tier. Absolutely, it was such amazing payoff for all these characters. Now, the stuff with the reveal that Caleb encountered Dolores at, like, when he was training, he went to the park. They had one specifically reserved to train military, where they would shoot a host as terrorist situation, whatever. And she had met him there because the other military guys wanted to just rape all of the hosts, and he was like, "No, we're not going to do that. We're not like these rich assholes." And at first, I don't know, that didn't sit right with me because I thought, so Dolores has just picked Caleb in the first place because of this incident. But no, that's actually, like, the more I thought about it, that's actually not really what they're saying. They're saying that, I mean, sure, that's part of it, but it's not the only or even the main reason why. The main reason why is that Caleb demonstrated that he was capable of choosing, of doing something different. Now, this is, again, we're getting to the main theme of the season, which is free will, which is, of course, the main theme of all the seasons, although the previous two were focused on the hosts. Do they have free will? And season 3 is more about humanity, which, honestly, I find way more interesting. This was kind of set up for at the end of season 2, in the season 2 finale, when they went into the forge and they found that little program with the hologram, or Logan, where he said that humanity were very simplistic, they were not complex, that there was free will didn't exist, that they were predetermined to act a certain way. And that's certainly Serac's and Rehoboam's view, that humanity is, in fact, those who aren't easily manipulated or predictable are dangerous and should be kept in ice. Whereas Dolores is taking the other view, is those like Caleb who do have the capacity to choose that humanity can choose. That's just, as she said in this episode, fucking hard. So it contradicts what was said at the end of season 2, that there's no such thing as free choice and everything's predetermined and humanity is very simplistic. They're saying there are outliers, and those are the ones who should be running things, not that humanity should be encouraged to have free will, even if chaos is the product of that. Having choice, being free, having free will is more important than maintaining order. And I think, and again, she's relating to him in that manner. Now, I mentioned earlier how there was an opinion I've heard on this finale which is objectively wrong. And that is the sentiment I heard, that this turn of Dolores suddenly becoming good was not earned. It was out of character for her. Some people even refer to this as a reverse Daenerys situation. And I'm sorry, you're objectively wrong. Like, you completely misread the show if you don't think that this was a well-earned, well-developed, perfectly paced reveal. For several reasons. I've already got into some earlier about how if you thought Dolores was the villain throughout the season, then why the fuck would you think that, really? Because that means Serac is the hero? Fuck no, he's not the hero. I mean, it could be Dolores' intentions were no good, were just to manipulate Caleb, but you didn't know that. So you didn't know that she was the villain. If you assumed she was, now all of a sudden she's good, then you just assumed wrong, because from the get-go, they presented the situation that she related to humanity for also being manipulated. And so what the reveal here is that she was kind of at a crossroads, like when she first escaped Westworld, because on one hand, she wanted to wipe out humanity for revenge, but on the other hand, she acknowledged the good in them and how the beauty, how because they created her and she got her sense of beauty from them, and how they're capable of good, how they're capable of beauty. And I think also seeing how they were being manipulated and her sense of wanting to do for them what she did for the hosts, giving them a choice, giving them free will, throwing them off their loops, as to say, was also, it was more important for both of their kinds to coexist. And that makes 1,000% sense for her character. Is 1,000% consistent with her character. And if you think, oh, this change came out of nowhere, then you either weren't paying attention to the show, or you're just flat out objectively wrong. There's a lot of cases where I'll be like, oh, if you have a different opinion, that's fine. Maybe that's your opinion. We share opinions. Everyone has their opinions. But in this particular case, that's not the case. It's not your opinion. You are wrong if you think this character change came out of nowhere, or if it's anywhere near what they did to Daenerys. I think that's actually really insulting to even mention what that bullshit they did at the end of Game of Thrones with Daenerys and compare it to this. You are like way off, 1,000% wrong. Anyway, I would just say, more kindly way to put it, you need to go back and watch season 3 again and pay a bit more attention. This was well paced, 1,000% earned, and makes 1,000% sense. In fact, I think this was a much better ending. Like, had they gone the other way and actually had it so Dolores was just manipulating Caleb in order to wipe out humanity like Bernard suspected, that would be less interesting to me. That would be a bit less dynamic. That would be a bit more, mustache twirly. Because here's the thing. I love what they did to Dolores in season 3, because in season 2, her character was a bit too one-beat. It was a bit too mustache twirly villain. And you might say, well, then it makes no sense to have her be good all of a sudden when she was so evil in season 2. No, it's called character growth. And in fact, it's called well-earned character growth, which this season did such a great job of earning. So, and God, and this season's just so complex. Anyone who thinks this season is dumbed down again are objectively wrong. This is more complex, and I think is complex in a much better way than the previous seasons were, by the way, because season 2 was a bit too confusing. Let's be clear here. Even though I like maybe some of the playing with linear time, they did maybe jack it up a bit and lost a few people. Where season 3, I love how they kept it. They didn't fuck with linear time. Everything was linear this season, and it was a bit easier to follow, but it was still complex. Just because it's just season 2 was too complex. It's not like, oh, it's dumbed down. Again, people say that objectively wrong. It totally was not. It's still completely complex, even more so, I would say. And the philosophical questions of what is free will and the character explanations, I think, is absolutely at its height. But also, you got Halloris. And again, this is such great payoff because it's showing, getting back to the character of Dolores, she was at a crossroads. Like, she thought, oh, on one hand, I want to wipe out on humanity, but on the other hand, I think they're worth saving. And she, the more her experiences and what she went through, meeting Caleb and everything, more took her down the direction that humanity was worth saving, and this is something worth doing, and saving humanity and setting them free, and getting rid of Oberlin was the right thing to do. On the other hand, you had Halloris, who had a totally different experience. She felt abandoned. She felt like she was just sent to die. She felt connected to this family who was then just killed off very heartlessly, and had the experience with pedophiles and shit, and how it was better just to kill them off. So her experiences led her to the conclusion that humanity is not worth saving, that it's that they should be wiped out. And I fucking love that. That is brilliant, absolutely amazing, brilliant storytelling. That you have basically the same person, but who splinter off into two totally different opposing sides because of their personal experience. And that, again, is really intelligent, really thoughtful, getting into the whole human experience, even though these are android or hosts, if you will. Brilliant storytelling. Now, let me talk a bit about Dolores' death. Because people are wondering, oh, is this, the end of Dolores? Is this the end of Evan Rachel Wood? Is she not going to be in the show anymore? And this kind of reminds me of the whole thing of Jon Snow in Season 5 of Game of Thrones, where I think, of course she is. Now, clearly, and they have confirmed this, and I have no doubt about this, I think it's 100% right. I take the writers at their word in this case, and I think it makes total sense. This version of Dolores is dead. And I think it's a great ending to this character. As I said, as I was just talking about, Dolores, when she made 5 copies of herself, she became 5 different people, or 4 copies of herself. And she became 5 different people, and the longer they're apart, the more individual and different these people are. And so you do have this version of Dolores, who is unique, who's the one who hung out with Caleb, who had the master plan all along. She's dead. She's no more, and she sacrificed herself in order to save humanity and set them free, which I think was a perfect ending for her. But you still have 3 other versions of Dolores out there. Now, I don't count the Connolly one because that was pretty, I think that was, yeah. I mean, Charlotte Hell ran off with the Connells one. I'm sorry, his name's Connells. So maybe that is still out there, and she's going to revive him and try to turn him into her side. And of course, the Dolores one, she's her own thing. She's Dolores now. She's not Dolores. But you got 2 others. You got DeLawrence, the character of Lawrence. And I've seen some people, why even bother having Lawrence in the show? It's just fan service. No, it's not. I think it's great. I mean, it's setting up for the next season. That's what you want to do in a finale. Duh. But anyway, so you got DeLawrence, and then you have Masashi. And here's the thing. I've heard the theory that DeLawrence will become Dolores and be put back into them. But I don't think so. I think DeLawrence is going to stay DeLawrence. I think it's Ma Lawrence, or the Masashi one, who's going to be put in Dolores' body. And that's going to be Evan Rachel Wood. That's going to be Dolores going forward. And that makes the most sense to me because he doesn't have a body anymore. Lawrence still has his body. He's still Lawrence, whereas the Masashi got his head fucking chopped off. And who chopped off his head? Clementine and what's-her-face from Shogun World. And who do they work for? Who do they work with? Not Serac, with Maeve. Like, Maeve was working with Serac, so they were working with Maeve, so they were working with Serac by default. But Maeve is no longer working with Serac. So they're still going to be working with Maeve. Now that she's turned sides with kind of Team Dolores now. And so, they're going to meet up, and it's like, hey, we got this brain ball from Masashi, whose head we chopped off, and Maeve's going to be like, okay, let's create a Dolores host and put it right back in so we can have Dolores back again. I think that's clearly what's going to happen. Just my opinion, but that's what I think. Anyway, I got to talk about the post-credit scenes with William, which I'm actually glad they killed off this character. I think if we had enough of him, I'm going to save the world. Get rid of him. But, just like Evan Rachel Wood is not gone, neither is Ed Harris, because now we have the Man in Black host, which I think is an amazing idea. I think is a much better use of Ed Harris's time. And it gets me so excited for season 4, and so we're gonna get this post-apocalyptic season 4, this showdown between Dolores and probably Dolores, as I said. There's 2 versions still out there, and Maeve's on her team now, and Caleb's on their team. And how's this going to play out? And plus, you got Bernard and the Sublime. We're going to see the Sublime, so all those characters we haven't seen since season 2 who went off to Sublime, we will see again, which again is great stuff. So I'm very excited for season 4. And as I said, I love the season so much. Anyway, my rating for Westworld season 3, as if you don't already know, out of 10 is a 10, the best. Obviously, one of the best seasons of all time, and I stand by that. I am not being hyperbolic. This is probably in my top 5 favorite seasons of all time. I love this to death. I think it was brilliant, intelligent, well thought out, well planned, well paced. Much, 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 much better than the first 2 seasons. It's a masterpiece. I can't wait for season 4, even though I am kind of certain there's no way they're going to be able to maintain this. I'm sure season 4 is not going to be as good as this, but I still can't wait for it. So anyway, that is it for my review of Westworld season 3. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please check out my channel as I review many other shows such as Star Trek The Expanse and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And if you do enjoy this channel, would appreciate it very much if you would support me on Patreon. Even just $1 a month will get you access to Patreon only videos, which are usually Star Trek oriented. You get lots of other like goodies, like schedules of what videos I'm coming up. And if you want to donate $10 or more, then you can request any video you want me to do within reason, and I shall do it for you. So, and it's very helpful, especially in these tough times. Get this channel going. It would be very much appreciated. But even if you're not in a place to do that right now, you can still hit that subscribe button. Keep up with my channel. Check me out. Also very much appreciated. So be sure to do that so you can keep up with everything that's coming. And thanks a lot for watching.